So this session we'll do, so last session, you remember, okay, well, we're doing the module on Samsara and Nirvana, right? We'll do 6 sessions. So we've done already 2 sessions. This is the third. So the first session we just discussed in general, what is Samsara, what is Nirvana, a bit about renunciation, and then about the Four Noble Truths, how the Four Noble Truths relate to what Samsara is. And then last session, we went over all the different sufferings of samsara, the 6 sufferings of samsara in general, and then the 8 sufferings of especially the human realm. So what was it? Birth, sickness, old age, and death. And then not basically not getting what you want, or not meeting with what you desire, or being separated from what you desire, meeting with what you don't desire. And then, although you try to get what you want again and again, being dissatisfied, not getting it, and then the most important one of those, the suffering of the contaminated aggregates, and then also the 3 sufferings, right? Suffering of suffering, which is like painful feelings, then the suffering of change, which is contaminated pleasant feelings, which don't last and are in the nature of not being satisfactory, transform into dissatisfaction and suffering. And then the pervasive compounding suffering, which is again, it's similar to the contaminated aggregates, in that it's neutral feelings that, because they're produced by afflictive emotions and karma, then they're fundamentally dissatisfactory, and they're like a condition for leading into more attachment, anger, jealousy, greed, pride, all the other afflictive emotions and karma, which perpetuate samsara. So, but we didn't get last session, we didn't get time to meditate. So we'll take time this session at the beginning as a way of generating a motivation, preparing for the session, and reviewing what we went over last session. So we'll meditate a bit on, especially the different kinds of suffering, especially within the 8, those are the 6 kinds of suffering, 8 types of suffering, and the 3 sufferings. The most important is the 3 types of suffering: suffering of change, and pervasive compounding suffering. And within those, the most important is the pervasive compounding suffering. So we'll spend some time, maybe 10 minutes or so, meditating on those different kinds of suffering we went over last week, and then and try to build up to generating a bodhicitta motivation for this session. And then I'll tell you what else we're going to do. So as a basis for for meditation, then I wanted to also just use there's actually 2 verses from a prayer. It's a daily, like a short Lamrim prayer that's good to use for daily practice, called the 3 Principal Aspects of the Path. The title's down here, by Legtsok. So this is from the FPMT prayer book. So actually, what's here, 2 verses here. The first 2 verses is 1 verse in the Tibetan, but they expanded it. So this is speaking about just the sufferings of samsara as a and how the importance of reflecting on those to generate renunciation. Remember, renunciation is the wish to be free from samsara by seeing its faults. So let me look at the prayer. Freedoms and endowments are difficult to find. So I mean, this is precious human rebirth. We've been born a human. We've met with the Buddhist teachings. We have some faith. We have capability of practicing. So freedoms and endowments are difficult to find. And life has no time to spare. Actually, it means life doesn't last long. Life is, our life is short. We're all going to die. When we're going to die is uncertain. At the time of death, only Dharma helps. So speaking about impermanence and death. So how fortunate this situation are to be born a human, and how, all the other fortunate circumstances we have in our life, but yet these won't last long. There's no telling when life is going to come to an end. So by gaining familiarity with this, by reflecting on it again and again, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. So it means we'll recognize that we're going to leave this life and go to a future life. So recognizing that, then we should use the fortunate circumstances we have, especially the circumstance of having met the Dharma and having some faith and having the ability to practice Dharma to prepare for future lives, to prepare for the event of death and going into future lives. So essentially, what should we do is abandon harming any other being, and practice benefiting others as much as possible in order to create habits in our behavior and our actions for having a happy life, and also create causes in the future to have a good rebirth and a happy life in which we can continue practicing Dharma. So that's abandoning, attachment to just this life. But what we're focused on in this module, the middle scope, is abandoning attachment to all of the pleasures of samsara and trying to generate aspiration to transcend those and achieve the unsurpassed happiness of freedom from samsara or nirvana. So then the next verse, by thinking over and over again that actions means karma and their effort and their effects are unbetraying. So karma and the effects of karma are unbetraying, means they're definite. And repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence. So that's what mainly we were thinking about last week, was the miseries of cyclic existence, all the different forms of suffering and dissatisfaction in samsara, in cyclic existence. So by thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. So we recognize that even future rebirths through the power of afflictive emotions and karma is also fundamentally dissatisfactory. Therefore, we need to uh, try to find a state that transcends being under the power of afflictive emotions and karma, where rather our the continuation of our existence in the future after death is produced by the force of wisdom, compassion, kindness, morality, and virtuous aspirational prayers and so forth. So when by having trained in that way, there is no arising, even for a second, of attraction to the perfections or the pleasures of cyclic existence, all day and night, the intention seeking liberation arises. So seeking nirvana or liberation from samsara arises. Then the thought of renunciation has been generated. So that's the definition of renunciation. Anyway, let's just start by um, reviewing especially the sufferings of samsara. So maybe first, of the three types of suffering, we can just start with a few minutes on the suffering of suffering, painful feelings. Well, yeah. So if you like, you can combine that with, thinking about the other kinds of suffering, like the suffering of sickness is easy, or old age, or birth. Anyway, spend a few minutes thinking about different unpleasant experiences, painful feelings that you experience just in this life or past lives. And then spend a few minutes reflecting on the suffering of change. So remember, it's pleasant, uh, contaminated feelings that don't last, that transform into suffering. So the whole point is that right from the beginning of most pleasant experiences, pleasant feelings we have, then the pleasantness we experience is in comparison to or in relation to the relief of other more intense suffering. But that most of those pleasant experiences are right from the beginning in the nature of dissatisfaction. And then the longer we have them, then the more their suffering nature becomes manifest. So try to think of some different examples in your own experience. And then also the dissatisfying nature of samsara as a whole, but especially pleasant feelings, how they're in the nature of suffering. And then finally, let's spend a few minutes thinking about the pervasive compounding suffering. So remember, this is essentially neutral feelings and the objects of those feelings, um, which are in the nature of suffering primarily because they're produced from afflictive emotions and karma, and because they're also a condition for giving rise to further afflictive emotions, attachment, anger, ignorance, and contaminated karma in the future. And now this is closely related to just having the contaminated aggregates, means the body and mind, which are in a state because they're again produced from afflictive emotions and karma, and a condition for giving rise to the further more of the same. Then it's in the nature of suffering, means it's in a fundamentally dissatisfying state. So thinking of these, the contaminated aggregates are body and mind, being under the control of afflictive emotions and contaminated karma, and then also pervasive compounding suffering. Thinking about this, try to generate kind of renunciation, aversion to, or wish to be free from the suffering of samsara. Remembering that samsara is just this perpetuation of, or taking rebirth in contaminated aggregates again and again through the force of afflictive emotions and karma. And then finally, so by reflecting on the sufferings of samsara, the suffering of change, pervasive compounding suffering in relation to ourselves, our own situation, we generate renunciation. So by thinking about the same in relation to others, other sentient beings, then we generate compassion and bodhicitta. So then remembering, so can visualize ourselves around, surrounded by all sentient beings again, beginning with our mother of this life to our immediate left, and all of our female friends and family. Imagine they're sitting to your left and behind you, supporting you, and then to your right, your father of this life, and then all your male friends and family, those who've been most supportive to you in this life, and then those whom you're most prone to become irritated or angry with. Imagine seated a little in front of you, facing towards you, a little distant. And then all the other sentient beings seated around. So briefly reflect how they're the same and um, sort of without their control, experiencing again and again the sufferings of suffering, the suffering of change, pervasive compounding suffering, being under the control of afflictive emotions and karma, but not recognizing this, not knowing how to be free from the cycle of rebirth, death, and rebirth again and again. So thinking of that, generate compassion. And if you can, generate the aspiration to achieve oneself to not only be free from samsara, but achieve full enlightenment in order to be able to know exactly how to lead every other sentient being to freedom from suffering ultimately. And then think for that purpose, then I'll engage in this session. Okay. So then let's recite this 4 immeasurable thoughts and then a prayer of bodhicitta, refuge. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to be able to abide in equanimity, free from attachment to friends and anger towards enemies. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they have happiness and its causes. I myself will cause them to have these. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and its causes. I myself will cause them to be free from these. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to never be separated from the happiness which is totally beyond suffering. It's the happiness of liberation and full enlightenment. May they never be separated from these. I myself will cause them to be never separated from these. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. And then we can recite the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. So if you like, briefly visualize or imagine Shakyamuni Buddha or your own teachers of this life in the space in front of you, or in the nature of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Generate the mind of refuge, um, fear of the suffering of samsara, and confidence or trust that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha have the ability to free one from the suffering of lower realms, suffering of samsara, to protect one. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my 2 collections from listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my 2 collections from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, Sangha. By my 2 collections, so collections of merit and wisdom, from listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. So again, think, in order to free myself and all other sentient beings from every form of suffering, and to develop myself and all sentient beings to the peerless state of happiness, enjoyment, fulfillment, state of full enlightenment, I myself must quickly become enlightened, and therefore I'll engage in this session on samsara and nirvana. Okay, so that's preliminary meditation. So what are we going to do today? Today, let's see. So actually, this is made outlines for the next 2 sessions, because the next thing to cover, remember, we're looking at samsara and nirvana. We talked about the basic and combining that with looking at the 4 noble truths. So last week we spent entirely on the truth of suffering, on the different, which is the effect of the truth of the causes of suffering. So this week and next week we'll look at the cause of suffering, which is basically delusions or afflictive emotions and karma. Those 2. It's all suffering is produced from afflictive emotions and karma. So I wanted to spend 2 weeks on it because we'll spend more time on attachment, anger, and ignorance, the 3 root. These are the 3 root afflictive emotions. So after we look at the general outlines from liberation of the palm of your hand, and then some general things about afflictive emotions or delusions, like what are they exactly? How do they affect the mind? What are their causes? What are their effects? Then we'll look at each attachment in much more detail, and anger in much more detail, and ignorance in some detail. So we'll do, and that'll take more than 1 session. It'll take at least 2 sessions. And then karma will, just because there's a whole module in Discovering Buddhism on karma, I'll just touch on it, or probably speak about it more in the context of the 12 links of dependent arising. So these are so for this, let's see, this in the next session, these 5 headings: outlines from the liberation of the palm of your hand, more about delusions and karma, or about delusions and afflictive emotions in general. These 2 are synonymous. You see, I put delusions, I prefer afflictive emotions, I think I mentioned last week. but delusions is also used. They're both translations of kleshas, Sanskrit, or nyomong in Tibetan. Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about what actually we mean here, but just for now, just know they're synonyms: delusions and afflictive emotions. And then more on attachment, more on anger, and more on ignorance. So that's the quote we used. So here are the outlines from Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand. First, yeah. So where are we? So within the Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand, I don't know, remember from before, so we're looking at the middle scope, within the three scopes of Lam Rim, the path shared with beings of small capacity, the path shared with beings of the middling capacity, and the great scope, path of bodhisattvas. Then we're looking at the middle scope. And the middle scope has two root outlines, or two headings. Something about looking at the dissatisfying or suffering of samsara. I don't know. Let's look at what is it said about. That was at the beginning of the last big session. No, that went too far. Here. Developing thoughts yearning for liberation, and ascertaining the path, the nature of the path leading to liberation. So first is developing thoughts yearning for liberation by looking at all the sufferings of samsara. Right? So that's what we did last week. And then ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. Right? I can't see it. Yeah, leading to liberation. So now we're looking at that. Okay, so ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation, again, has two headings. Thinking about the suffering of the source of suffering, right? So this is the second noble truth. Thinking about the source of suffering, the entry to samsara. Yeah, and then Pabonka Rinpoche, he says there, because you kind of think, well, that's thinking about the source of suffering is not the nature of the path leading to liberation, but it's only by understanding, the source of an illness that you can understand how to be free from it. So that's why it's put here. But in sometimes it's also put with it the above heading, generating wish to be free from some suffering. Because when you do think about all the sources, the afflictive emotions and karma, which are the cause of samsara, then you do want to be free from those. And that's how in this prayer that's in Tsongkhapa, he put, here, repeatedly contemplating the miseries of psychoexistence. No, sorry, by thinking over and over again the actions, basically karma and its effects, suffering. So karma and its effects both by thinking about those don't generate renunciation. Anyway, so this heading, thinking about the source of suffering, which is what we'll do today and next week, and then actually ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. These two headings. And then, so the first, thinking about the source of suffering, the entry to samsara is the causes of suffering. So we're looking at. So, and that's the second of the Four Noble Truths. So first of all, how delusions are developed, and then how karma is accumulated through delusions, and then how one leaves, let's see, rebirth. That's something wrong with that. How one leaves one rebirth at death and is conceived in another. Yeah, that's right. So how one dies from one life and it takes rebirth again. And then how delusions from within those three, the first, how delusions are developed, has four headings: identification, and we'll go through all four of those now. Identification of the delusion. So what is a delusion? What is essentially what is it? The stages of their development, what are the causes and conditions, and how do they develop? Well, the causes of, sorry, so I mixed those two up. The stages of the development means how does one delusion give rise to the others? Yeah. And then the causes, what are the causes in general that give rise to any afflictive emotion or delusion? And then what are the drawbacks? What are their faults? Why are they so bad? What's wrong with them? Is the fourth. So then the first, identification of the illusion. So within those, so we'll go over all these four outlines. And then when we start talking about attachment, anger, and ignorance, that comes under these. Identification of the delusions. Oh, no, sorry. So the first outline, identification of the delusions, it lists first the six root delusions, and then there's also the secondary delusions, which are infinite in number. Um, yeah, yeah. So there's these four outlines. First, identifying afflictive emotions, the stages of the development, the causes of afflictive emotions, and their drawbacks. So first, identifying afflictive emotions. Then see here, there's a whole list. Um, but then we'll go through attachment, anger, and ignorance. The three root delusions are these in more detail a little later. Okay, so yeah, so these are the three root delusions. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, just identifying afflictive emotions. So what's the definition of an afflictive emotion? There's a nice, clear, short description by Arya Asanga, where he says, an afflictive emotion, or an affliction. So affliction is just another synonym for afflictive emotion. An affliction is defined as a phenomena that, when it arises, um, it is disturbing in character, and that through arising disturbs the mind stream. So you might think, well, an earthquake is disturbing in character, but it's not an afflictive emotion. Actually, an earthquake fits the definition quite well. I never thought of it before. Because an earthquake is a phenomena that, when it arises, is disturbing in character, shakes the ground, destroys buildings, scares everyone, and through arising, it disturbs the mind stream. But why isn't an earthquake an afflictive emotion? Because it's not a consciousness, obviously. So an afflictive emotion, of course, is a consciousness. It arises. They don't arise. It's other people don't give them to us. We don't, eat them, and they give us indigestion or something. But rather, it's a state of mind that arises. Um, so it's a kind of awareness arises in our own mental continuum, in our own mind. Mm. So think about, I don't know, first why don't we think about an instance in your own experience of an afflictive emotion. Maybe that's arisen recently in, last days or months, like worry or jealousy or I've afflicted fear and self-doubt or anger. Anger is the most obvious one, right? Or irritation. So first just think of, I'll stop talking for a second. Think of an afflictive emotion. So does it fit the definition? It's a phenomena, or something that exists, that when it arises, it's disturbing in character. So is it such that it's, disturbs the peace of your mind? It arises. And that through arising disturbs the mind stream. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Actually, the definition is kind of dissatisfying. It's kind of repetitive now. Disturbing in character. I think it means and through arising disturbs the mind stream. Mm. I think the idea is that it's like a cause and effect. It's disturbing a character. It means the afflictive emotion that acts as a cause to produce disturbance. And then its effect is that one's own mind stream is disturbed when they arise. Um, maybe another, yeah. So yeah, see if that fits for your own description. So the purpose of looking at a definition like this is to define. We want to clearly define what an afflictive emotion is. So the way to do that is to take a kind of sort of short description like this, like a definition is, and then look at different instances in our own experience and other being the object of other people's afflictive emotions, and see if it fits, so that in the future, when we start to give rise to an afflictive emotion, we can more quickly identify and then take action to deal with it, to apply antidotes, and try to prevent it from arising, or prevent it from lasting a long time or arising so strongly. So, but another aspect of afflictive emotions that we'll look more at later, especially in relation to attachment and anger, but is that the way they perceive their object is always distorted. That, when an afflictive emotion arises, the way it engages its object, like attachment, exaggerates the pleasantness and exaggerates the ability of things to give us pleasure. Whereas anger exaggerates the negative aspects and focus of an object, and exaggerates their ability to give us harm. Jealousy, exaggerates the sort of the things that the person or the things that we're jealous of, exaggerates their kind of success or pleasure. Um, or arrogant pride exaggerates our own superiority to someone else, or our own qualities and characteristics. And they all exaggerate, all afflictive emotions exaggerate the importance of ourself, as opposed to others. So all afflictive emotions arise from self-centered attitude, kind of selfish concern. Um, yeah, sort of being more, well, yeah, being more concerned, or sort of, being more concerned with ourselves than others, or having a sort of sense of self-importance, thinking that our own, happiness and our own kind of dramas, our own struggles are much more significant, much more important, matter much more than those of anyone else. So kind of selfish concern gives rise to all the afflictive emotions. And then, then there's so this list of the 6 root delusions. Actually, if you expand it, it's 10, because the 6th has within it views. The 6th views has within it 5 different views. But so again, the 3 root are attachment, anger, and ignorance. These are the 3 root delusions. And then an additional 3 are pride, so arrogant pride, and inflated sense of oneself, thinking oneself is better than others. Then doubt, afflicted doubt. So there's wholesome doubt and afflicted doubt. Wholesome doubt is just like a healthy skepticism. But afflictive doubt is doubt that paralyzes us, such that we can't act. We can't decide what to do. So that kind of doubt, then we need to work to overcome. And then there's views. So within views there are, I don't think it's so useful to go through these, so I won't very much. But views of the perishing aggregates. I mean, this one is, in one way, if you've done the reading, you'll see in one interpretation it's synonymous with ignorance. That, actually for our purpose, you consider these two are basically almost synonymous. But the view of the perishing aggregates is, so the perishing aggregates means our own body and mind, which are by nature impermanent. So they're perishing. They're each moment they're going out of existence. They're in that the next moment they don't exist in the way they did before. So each moment they're changing. In that way, they're not static. So our own body and mind are perishing aggregates. And then when we view our own body and mind, we grasp at them being a self, or we grasp at there being a self, an I, from its own side, independent of causes and conditions, independent of parts, just by its own power, and especially independent of mental imputation, independent of our idea of a self. So completely independent of, separate from our idea of a self, it feels like there's this I, the self, that exists by its own power or from its own side, and therefore naturally the meaning of our life is to protect and defend and fulfill the aims of that self. So it's a kind of wrong view, which is the fundamental ignorance, actually, which is the root cause for the other, all the other afflictive emotions arise from this one, right? So in Buddhism, when I was saying, the root of samsara is this ignorance, and the root of samsara is also the view of the perishing aggregates is one instance of ignorance. It's an ignorance grasping at the self of persons. There's another kind of ignorance, which is also root of samsara, ignorance grasping at a self of phenomena. Anyway, we'll come back to that later. But for now, just know one of these views is the view of the perishing aggregates. Then there's extreme views. For example, I don't know, thinking that by killing your enemy, you go to heaven, for example, would be an extreme view. Or thinking by, like it was just in the news recently, that by starving yourself in Kenya, there's this cult where people were convinced to starve themselves to death in order to meet Jesus. So that's an idea, that's an example of an extreme view. You have a view that by starving yourself to death, then that will, bring you like salvation, be a way to heaven. Or self-mortification is a kind of extreme view. Then holding views as supreme. So then holding that kind of view as being the supreme view. So thinking that, this view that by killing my enemies or by starving myself to death, that's the only way for salvation to heaven. By holding that view as supreme is another wrong view. And then holding wrong ethics and behavior to be supreme. So that again is similar. And then holding wrong views. So wrong views here means primarily thinking that the law of karma, the law of cause and effect, does not exist. Means whatever we do, it doesn't matter. There's no retribution ultimately. Or that thinking even that past and future lives do not exist. Thinking that it's impossible to ever be free from suffering. Liberation, nirvana does not exist. Or thinking that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha don't exist. So does that mean that we shouldn't be skeptical about all those things, or it's not okay to question those things? No, it means it's okay to question whether or not, just questioning whether or not karma, the law of cause and effect as is described in Buddhist teachings, is true or not. That's just responsible, healthy skepticism. That's not a wrong view. But if we come to the conclusion that no, they don't exist, there is no karma, then then it becomes a wrong view, right? So, but then it becomes a little problematic, because how can you have a balanced questioning of something if if it's said that, well, answering one way is just going to be wrong? Well, that's just the Buddhist view of things, right? So if you decide karma, law of cause and effect, doesn't exist, then you just have to for yourself be comfortable with disagreeing with Buddhist teachings, which is okay. But the reason it's called a wrong view, especially that thinking like karma doesn't exist, is because it can easily lead into irresponsible behavior, where we think that no matter what we do, if we steal from other people, or lie and cheat other people, or are unfaithful and so forth, that as long as we don't get caught, and nobody finds out about it, then it's fine. Then there's no long-term repercussion. So it can lead into, if we think karma, law of cause and effect, doesn't exist, it can easily lead into that kind of immoral, unethical behavior. Whereas if we have a definite belief in karma, then we know that whatever we do to harm others by stealing from them or cheating on them or so forth, then it's going to not only harm others, it's going to harm us as well in the end. So it becomes a very strong support for ethical behavior. So that's why that it's considered a quite heavy wrong view to not believe. And then it's the same with past and future lives. Anyway, if you have more questions about it, we can come back to it, but I don't want to spend too much time on it now. Anyway, so the definition of an afflictive emotion is an affliction is a phenomena, or actually it's a consciousness would be better to put there. That when it arises, it disturbs. Um, it's disturbing in character, and through arising, disturbs our own mental mind stream, causes um, uh, the opposite of peace. The idea is that if we had no afflictive emotions in our mind, then our mind would naturally be like, a pond or a lake, totally undisturbed by the wind. The water would settle down and have a very clear, think of lake with a very clear water. If it's disturbed by wind and there's a lot of waves on the surface, um, then you can't see into it very clearly. And it doesn't reflect also the light and the images of things around it. But if it's totally undisturbed, then it naturally settles down and becomes very smooth, glassy surface, which you can easily see through into the water, and also it reflects everything around it. So like that, if our mind is undisturbed by afflictive emotions, then naturally it becomes very calm and clear, and we can know all phenomena very clearly. And then, with wisdom, then we can easily generate wisdom and work for the benefit of ourselves and other sentient beings. So then the stages of development. So here, Dharmakirti is another Buddhist pundit from India, says once there is a self, there is an idea of other. So it means this afflicted idea of self. Once there's this grasping at a self, then there's an idea of an inherently existent or an other existing from their own side. And then on behalf of self and others, there's attachment and hostility or anger. All of the faults. So all the faults of samsara, all the other afflictive emotions, and all the other karma, and then the resultant suffering arise from or in association with these. So this is really talking about how samsara is produced. It's produced from this fundamental ignorance, grasping at an exaggerated sense of self, a self that's completely independent and exists by its own power from its own side. So we'll come back when we talk about ignorance. We'll look at that in more detail. But so essentially, though, what he's saying, and the main point we need to take away here is that it's from this fundamental ignorance, which is the root cause of samsara, then that gives rise to selfishness. So we have this exaggerated sense of like a concrete, real self, and then that gives rise to a concern, exaggerated concern for ourselves at the cost of being concerned about others. So it's total selfish, egocentric, egotistical mind. And then that gives rise to attachment, things that we desire, things that we perceive as pleasurable from their own side, and then we desire to possess them or enjoy them. And then when that attachment is blocked from achieving what it wants, then we get angry. So attachment gives rise to anger. So this is very important, this kind of progress from, and we have to check in our own experiences if this is the case. So usually in our own experience, we catch ourselves when we're getting angry or when we're getting like very jealous or proud. So then we look at that afflictive emotion, we can see, did that arise from a concern for others primarily or concern for myself, selfish concern? Did that selfish concern arise from an innate sense of grasping at truly existent self or not? So we'll come back to that, but for now, that's what it's talking about in the stages of development, is that how the afflictive emotions arise. And then, so these are all afflictive emotions, right? Ignorance gives rise to selfishness, that gives rise to attachment, that gives rise to anger. And then anger gives rise to, so if we were to continue, then gives rise to karma, right? Karma. And then karma gives rise to suffering, right? All the sufferings we looked at last week. So that's the process, how samsara is produced. So then the next in this outline is the causes of the afflictive emotions. So these are general causes. We'll look at many more later. But there's 6 general causes here. One is the basis. So the basis are the seeds and imprints of and habituation to afflictions, to afflictive emotions. So this means like from past lives. in past lives, we've gotten angry again, again and again, jealous again and again. And each time, we get angry or jealous, it places seeds in the mind for that same delusion to arise again in the future when it meets the right cause and conditions. Just like if a weed grows in a garden, then each time a weed grows to maturity, it places seeds, it creates seeds. Those seeds fall to the ground. And if the ground is dry, they just sit there waiting for, moisture and warmth, the opportunities for them to grow again. So I like that. So the basis is seeds and imprints of the afflictive emotions. And the kind of habitual, there's a sort of energy of habituation that we have to react in the same ways to the same like provocations. So that's the basis. And then there's the object, the appearance of objects that trigger the arising afflictive emotions. So, like with attachment, there might be some food that if you just hear about it or see it immediately, your mouth starts watering. You want that food. Or some person that if you hear about, in the news or hear someone else talk about them, immediately triggers like irritation, dislike. So there's objects that act as like triggers. That's another cause. And then society. Social or society. So it's people and messages that encourage us to generate and follow afflictive emotions. So, if we like friends or acquaintances who, like maybe have a lot of anger and they're always harping on, the faults of, I don't know, the faults of the government, or getting angry about, how maybe at work there might be someone who's, always angry at the management or something. So if you hang out and speak with those people again and again, it's going to generate the same ideas and the same disturbances in your own mind. Right? Does that mean we should totally ignore and avoid them? No, not necessarily, but be careful how they affect us, and then try to, if we see it's causing us to generate similar afflictive emotions, and try to maybe spend less time with them. And then also messages, like advertising. The job of advertisers is to generate attachment in our minds so that we buy the products they want to sell us. Um, so have to be, aware of that. Or like if you play video games, so many video games is about violence now, or so kind of causing the habituation to um, becoming, solving problems through violence, or many movies and so forth. Or if you look at like sitcoms or so much um, comedy on TV, so much revolves around sex, talking about, you know, kind of reinforcing this idea that's the best pleasure is sex. Um, so there's all these kinds of society, generally these kind of influences by messaging from people or other media that give rise to afflictive emotions. Have to be aware of those. Um, and then explanations. So there's teachings that instill and increase afflictive emotions. Um, So again, it's like, I don't know, I guess like hate speech in a religious context would be one example, or um, somebody explaining something in ways that is still like bigotry, racism. Then there's some kind of explanations of things in a spiritual context or in even a secular context that, you know, that that instill either attachment or pride, or kind of pride, like nationalism, nationalistic pride is one form of pride, or sense that, our group is better, we're better than them, and encourage disregard for other people, other groups. So that's another cause of afflictions. And then habituation, becoming further accustomed to past afflictions. So just in this life, not to speak of, the seeds and imprints, but just in this life, if we don't look at, how our mind gets irritated in certain circumstances, greedy in other, and selfish in other circumstances, and we just, because afflictive emotions just arise automatically without our willing them to happen. They just arise automatically and then can affect our behavior if we're not careful. So if we just don't give any thought to um, what afflictive emotions are arising, how they're affecting us, and we just follow them, then each time it's like we create a rut, It's like, horse carriage going through the mud. Each time makes the rut deeper and deeper, and it's harder and harder to get out of that rut. So we we have, or we generate, this habituation to reacting in the same way to the same stimuli. So by becoming aware of that, then we can start to try to make more deliberate choices about, when we see a thought arise to do something, is that wise to follow that or not? Make a more deliberate choice. And then finally, attention. Erroneous engagement with objects, such as conceiving of. There's these kind of wrong ways of thinking about things, mistaken ways of thinking about things, which encourage afflictive emotions. So by grasping at, so these are 4 classical ones, but we can try to come up with our own examples. But by grasping at what is impermanent to be permanent. So like a classic example is something, especially with friends and family, that's why we're so, well, it's one reason we can be so shocked when, someone that we're close to dies and passes away, because we have this habitual tendency to kind of assume that we'll always be together, or they'll always be around. Even though logically, if someone asks you, will that be the case? We know it's not, but it's sort of instinctively, especially someone we're attracted to or something we're attracted to, we kind of grasp at it in such a way that we sort of deludedly think it's not going to change. It's always going to be there. It's always going to give me the same kind of satisfaction. Or our own body, our own mind. We tend to have a sense that it's just going to last. It's going to be this way indefinitely. So something that actually is impermanent is changing moment by moment, and eventually it's going to cease to exist. We grasp at it as being something that will always exist. Is what is meant by permanent here. It will always exist. And then we grasp at things that are in the nature of suffering as being in the nature of happiness. So remember the suffering of change, things that like delicious food, nice, pleasant sounds, and our experience and the pleasant feelings that we get from experiencing those. We grasp at those as being in the nature of happiness. So again, if the pleasant feelings that we have mostly were in the nature of happiness or pleasant experiences that we have, then the longer we prolong those, the more they should just give more and more and more pleasure. Like laying in the sun was in the nature of happiness, then the longer we lay in the sun, we should just feel more and more happy because it's the nature of that thing. But the longer we lay in the sun, the more painful it becomes, right? Until we need to go jump in the ocean. So so that's another kind of erroneous grasping at things that are in the nature of suffering as being in the nature of happiness. And then grasping what is impure as being pure. This primarily is related to our bodies, especially if we're attached to another person's body. Then actually the body, just like we can see our own body, it's totally impure. It's full of undigested food and urine and feces and blood, and it's producing bad smells if we don't wash it all the time, and dead skin and hair and plaque and mucus, all kinds of impure things just coming out of all the orifices of our body. But yet when we're attached to our own body or someone else's body, we grasp it as being something very pure and clean, which is kind of a distortion. And then last, what is lacking and independent of self as having a truly existent self. So actually, when we look at what we are as a person, we see we're just a collection of parts that are all changing all the time. And if we try to find, the essence or soul, this kind of unchanging, essential self at the center of all of this, what we are as a person, you can't find, no. But yet we grasp at that as existing, that there's just some kind of essential core of what I am, independent of my body, independent of my mind, independent of my own ideas about anything. It's just this essential self. So actually we're lacking that. That's not there, but we grasp at that as existing, truly existent self. So there's all kinds of wrong attention. So these are some of the general 6 causes of afflictions. So let's stop there for a break. But before, if there are any questions about anything I've just mentioned, if there are any short questions I can attach. Otherwise, if there are more extensive questions, we can talk about after the break. Okay. let's take a 5-minute break then and come back.
Welcome back, everyone.
Okay. Yes, welcome back, everyone. So we just have one more. So remember, there's 4 headings here under, just about the afflictive emotions in general, identifying them, the stages of their development, the causes of afflictive emotions, and then their drawbacks. It's the last one. So let's look at just some of the drawbacks. I'm going in the wrong direction. Yeah, so this is from an ornament to the sutras by Asanga, I believe. He says, delusions destroy you. You destroy sentient beings and destroy ethics. Lesser people disparage you. You lose guardians and gain your teacher's reproach. You gain disputes. You get in disputes and infamy, so you get a bad reputation. And then rebirth to unconducive states. You lose both what you possess and have yet to acquire. So you lose things you possess, and then you don't acquire new things, and you gain great suffering. So, when we think about like when we think about afflictive emotions in general, and then their effects, usually it's easiest to start with the very gross, obvious examples of them. So here, like say, and of the afflictive emotions, which one do you think is the strongest? What's the most disturbing afflictive emotion? The one that obviously, when it arises, it most obviously disturbs your mind.
Anger.
Anger, exactly. Yeah, anger. So when we think about like the afflictive emotions, it's easiest to start thinking about anger. All the way from, the definition of something that disturbs the mind. Anger. Obviously, when anger arises in your mind, it's very disturbing. It's much more difficult, to see how like attachment, because attachment is very difficult to identify, because when it arises in the mind, it's accompanied by like pleasant feelings. So it's much more difficult to see how attachment to something disturbs the mind. Although we can, but it's not as obvious as anger. So, so when we look at the drawbacks, then you take, well, maybe I should just finish saying. So, and when we're looking at the afflictive emotions, always in general, we should start with the very easy to identify obvious examples. And then look at more and more subtle examples to get a more and more subtle sense of what's going on. So like anger, we can look at very obvious examples of anger, and then look at more and more subtle variety, like shades of irritation, dislike, and see how it also disturbs the mind. And then we can look at, within attachment, one very strong, obvious form of attachment that obviously disturbs the mind is like jealousy. When we're attached to something and then it becomes morphs into like jealousy, obviously that really disturbs the mind a lot. But it's a form of, well, jealousy is kind of a mix, but it arises from like desiring something, seeing someone else has that which we desire, and then wanting it. So, but to look at here the faults of afflictive emotions, then so take anger. Think how anger destroys you, right? Delusions. So here it says delusions destroy you. So to make it more concrete, palpable, think how, if you get angry at someone again and again, like once when I was I don't know, after college, I worked on a fishing boat in Alaska, and for 3 months I was living on this boat with 4 other guys, and one of them, we really didn't like each other. He didn't like me, I didn't like him, so we were angry at each other all the time. But you're living on this little boat together, in the ocean. You have nowhere to go. You can't every day, morning, breakfast, lunch, dinner, working. I was working next to him on the boat. And we had to stack the net on the back of the boat, and he was stacking the corks. I was stacking the webbing. There was another guy stacking the lead line. So we were standing next to each other like all day long working. And you see how, if you get angry at really how just you can't be happy. In that moment that you're angry at, irritated at someone, in that moment, you totally can't be happy. You can't enjoy any of the things you ordinarily enjoy. And it really physically, you feel like icky, you feel kind of out of balance and, uptight or on edge, or kind of kind of get high blood pressure or heart races, or I mean, that's maybe in one moment when it generally comes, but and generally get angry, like you can't sleep well, you never feel relaxed. It's like physically it really disturbs you. So delusions destroy you. And then over long term, of course, they destroy your relationships or destroy your friendships. People don't want to be around you because you're not happy. Um, and then destroys sentient beings. So also you get angry, then it leads you into like harming other sentient beings, like saying, shouting at people, um, harming, killing, even I mean, killing, murders happen largely through the force of anger. Um, yeah, so it leads you to harm others, and then destroys your ethics. So you do things, sorry, that, where's my pointer? Oh. Um, destroys ethics. So through the force of, even like attachment. So anger, of course, leads you to do things that, killing, stealing, lying, but even attachment, a strong attachment. See in the news about people who, embezzled the company they're working for, embezzled a bunch of money. Why? Because of attachment to money or attachment to the things that money will buy. Um, Also, like adultery, you cheat on a person, they cheat on their spouse or something. Um, then why? Through the force of attachment to the pleasure of having a relationship with someone else. Then they uh, basically lie just to the person that they made a commitment to. Then lesser people disparage you. So again, you see through the force of anger, attachment, then you act in an unethical way. Then other people here, lesser people. That's a little bit difficult problem. I think it means like probably people that are considered to be like in a lower uh, kind of status, or like less famous, less wealthy, less powerful, in a kind of worldly way, lesser. Um, then they disparage you. Um, then you lose guardians and gain your teacher's reproach. So, like, I think this is more referring to if you're a spiritual practitioner, than if there's uh, like uh, deities of the white side, you can call, like, I don't know, devas or spirits that usually are like beings like non-incorporeal human beings, not human beings, but like, yeah, spirits or devas that usually support and protect you. That when they see you acting in an unethical way, or harming others, then they stop helping you. And then also your spiritual teachers, especially, they're disappointed with you, and they reprimand you, which is of course unpleasant. And then you gain disputes. You get into disputes with other people, and infamy, gain a bad reputation, or very, you're renowned as being kind of a unpleasant person. Um, and then rebirth, and then of course you create a negative karma. I mean, again, with anger, it's very obvious. You get angry at people again and again, then you create negative karma again and again. Then at the time of death, especially, you can see, imagine at the time of death, if you die with strong anger, that'll throw you into a very into a lower rebirth, into a very unpleasant state in the future, as a hell being, animal, hungry ghost, or a human being with a, I mean, anger can't throw you into rebirth as a human being. You have to take rebirth as a human being. You have to, the mind of death has to be at least neutral, or virtuous. Um, and then you lose both what you possess, so it leads to the loss of your possessions. Um, yeah, again, you can think of, you can easily think of examples from the news of people who were very well, like Bernie Madoff, was it? You know, through the attachment, have a huge, become very wealthy through the force. I mean, by the power of deceiving people, lying to, deceiving people, become very wealthy. But then when it's found out, you lose everything you have. Or if you have a very good, there's many examples of people who have a very good job in like corporation, but then they they um they embezzle from their company, and then it's found out, and then they're sued, they lose everything. Or like this lawyer in, where was it, in Georgia or Alabama or something. He's from this very powerful, this one family had held the seat of attorney general in this county from like 3 generations or something. And then, and he's a lawyer, he's a wealthy guy by ordinary standards, but was is never enough. So was embezzling or was it embezzling money from his clients and his law firm and his law firm. Then his law firm found out about it. And then he was convicted of killing his son and his wife in order to distract from, in order, the logic seems to be in order to create sympathy for him so that he wouldn't be persecuted for having stealing. Like in order to cover up his stealing, he murdered his own wife and son. So, and then of course, then now he's in prison, you lose everything. So yeah, leads you to do complete. I mean, that's the nature of afflictive emotions, though, is when they arise in our mind, they completely undermine our ability to think clearly, to think rationally, to think and to have like compassion and concern for others. They cut us off from our wholesome instincts and our wholesome kind of minds, and then cause us to act in completely. Maybe in the moment it seems kind of like somehow we create some kind of rationale for what we're doing, but it's completely distorted and cut off from what's wholesome and what's reality. So you lose both what you possess and what you have to acquire. And then you gain great suffering. In short, the afflictive emotions cause you to suffer by cause you to engage in non-virtuous behavior. Then you create a non-virtuous karma, and then the result is suffering. So that's it for this this presentation of the afflictive emotions in general. So are there any questions about that? Like, what is an afflictive emotion? What are this list of the main ones? What are the stages of development? This is the most important thing probably in the whole thing, is this program. But this, yeah, if you don't have a clear sense of, don't worry, we'll work on that. From ignorance to selfishness, attachment to anger. And then some of the main causes, and then the drawbacks. So any questions about any of that?
Kathleen has a question.
Thank you for your teachings, Venerable. I have a question about doubt. Could you speak a little bit more about doubt, please?
Yeah, doubt itself is not an afflictive emotion. There's wholesome doubt and there's afflictive doubt, both. So when we say doubt in the afflictive emotions, we mean the kind of afflicted doubt. So maybe it's helpful to try to clarify. I mean, there's a wholesome doubt is a sort of healthy skepticism. It's a doubt that we should have, like when I say, oh, every instance of anger arises from an instance of attachment. That we're always attached to something and we don't get what we want, and thereby, because we don't get what we want, then we get angry. So we should have doubt about that. We shouldn't just accept that at face value. The whole purpose of, in Buddhism, whenever we're learning about something, first we hear an explanation, and then, so there's hearing, contemplation, and then meditation. So the process is always, first we hear an explanation and learn, but then we should always have some kind of skepticism or doubt. Is that true? Asking, is that true or not? We need to ask the question again and again. Everything we hear, is that true or not true? Why or why not? So that's a healthy kind of doubt, right? Because that leads us into learning more. What are the reasons why that might not be true? And then what are the reasons why that might be true? And which set of reasons seem to be more compelling or more convincing or strong? So that leads us into deeper understanding. That's a healthy kind of doubt. So when we talk about doubt as an afflictive emotion, we mean like doubt that it's described as being like a two-pointed needle. Like a needle to sew with, it needs one point so that the needle can slip through the cloth. So we can draw the thread through the cloth to sew something together. It needs to have one point to move through the cloth. But if it has a two-pointed needle, it won't be able to go through the cloth. It'll get stuck every time we try to, so it won't pass through the cloth. So doubt is described as being like a two-pointed needle. It paralyzes us. Or again, it's like if we're walking through a forest, following a path through a forest and we come to a fork in the path, then we're not sure which way to go. I mean, ideally, we just can bring it up on Google Maps or something, and we have a map, and we look at a map and figure out where our destination lies, down, path A or path B. But if we don't have, there's no sign, we don't have a map, then, if we just kind of, we can easily get paralyzed with fear, like, oh no, what if I go down that path? I don't know what's going to happen. If I go down that way, what's going to happen? And then as long as we remain just in that doubt, then it prevents us from going down either path. And so we're not able to overcome the doubt. So in that situation, we just have to choose, just like, okay, just decide to try one path and see where it goes. And then we learn. And then if it doesn't go where we want, we come back and go down the other way. So like maybe a good example, I'll try to give a more concrete example of like afflictive doubt is like, well, I mean, a lot of us have this chronic like self-doubt. Can I do this or not? If someone asks us to, I don't know, give a presentation about something, like, and we just think, oh, I don't know if I can do it or not. Even after we've agreed to do it, but then as long as we give rise to this doubt, oh, I'm not sure I can do it, I don't know what to say, I don't know if they're going to like it or not, I'm not sure they're interested, I'm not sure if this is really the right thing for me to do. That kind of doubt, it kind of paralyzes us from just doing the task at hand. So so we have to recognize when we have that kind of doubt, and then try to find ways just to move through it, right? To go ahead and just start preparing for it. And then, yeah, I know I faced that recently. I was asked to give a presentation about, I don't know, what the Buddha said about desire for Nalanda Monastery in France. But I've never really presented on that topic. So for a few days while I was just thinking about it, I was like, oh no, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know what I'm going to say. But then the way to get over it is just to start doing research, and then you find this is something good, and then this is something good, and then just put these things together, and then before long it's like, okay, no, I have a collection of stuff here that actually it'll be a perfectly good presentation. It'll be fine. Yeah. I don't know, does that clear away, or you have some more specific question?
That was great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so we should have a sense of, okay, what an afflictive emotion is in general. So we should be able to now, why don't we take a moment and just kind of meditate? So what we want, the point of this whole presentation is to be able to be better at identifying, one, like what an afflictive emotion is, right? So maybe just bring to mind now, at least one clear example of an afflictive emotion, be it, an instance of doubt, or instance of irritation, or instance of like attachment, craving attachment. So bring to mind one instance from maybe recent. And then check, does it fit, when that emotion arose in the mind, well, see how it wasn't present before, and then it arose. So maybe think, what was the object that you came into contact with? Let's think about the causes a little bit. Was there an object that triggered that emotion to arise? And then also the basis. Does it seem like there were seeds or imprints or some kind of habituation in the mind such that it just arose automatically involuntarily, without your willing it, when it came into contact with the object. So what was the basis in terms of like the seed or the habituation? Was that there? And then the next one, society. Was there, to give rise to that afflictive emotion, the one you're thinking of? Was there some kind of influence from other people, maybe your parents or friends, or your some kind of views you developed in relation to them, or in relation to society in general, that kind of played a part in causing you to react in that way, in that situation? And the next one, explanation, is probably the least likely to have played a part. That were there wrong teachings or explanations um, that also played a part in causing you to have that afflictive emotion? This could be something like, like a religion that you practiced from childhood or something. Sometimes that's one. And then habituation is this kind of way of reacting to that particular afflictive emotion. Is it one um, it's kind of habitual? It's sort of a habitual reaction, one that you followed in the past, um, and not been able to recognize or apply effective antidotes to, and thereby it's kind of out of uh, habit or a sort of tendency, repetitive tendency. It arises again and again. Mm. And the last one maybe is the more difficult, but maybe to simplify, the afflictive emotion that you're thinking of, the example you're thinking of, did it arise from selfishness, from a self-centered concern, you know, being more concerned about yourself than anyone else, sort of having an egotistical concern? And then finally, did that afflictive emotion, did it arise from ignorance? So here, the specific ignorance, sort of in, from an innate grasping or sense of a self that seems to be independently existent or existing from its own side. That there's a sense of an I and the other person that just exist completely independent from, causes and conditions or parts or my own concepts. Those are kind of concrete, real self, and I'm acting on behalf of that. So was that sort of sense there? Acting as a basis for giving rise to it. And then finally, um, or if you did you follow that afflictive emotion, or if you had, could it have potentially led you into, or did it lead you into creating a negative karma, to doing something to harm yourself or harm someone else, thereby create negative karma, and thereby give rise to a result of suffering in the future? So think about some of the drawbacks. Okay, so we can pause our attention there. So this is the way, to use this presentation on afflictive emotions. And it's a very useful way to think. So I suggest, during the next week, as you're doing like your daily kind of meditations, so I also wanted to mention, because after the last session, the outlines that I used to make these slides, I sent them to the center, to the SBC. But then he apparently doesn't have an email list for all of you. I'd asked him to email the outlines to all of you, but he doesn't have a list. So he said, I guess there's a web page. I haven't visited it, but where there's material for the course. So he'll post it there. So you can go there. So like after this session, I'll send the outlines for this session and the next session. Actually, I'm just using like one Word document, and I just keep building more outlines onto it as I plan the sessions. So I just keep sending out the same Word document with more and more stuff on it every time. But but if you want the outlines, then they'll be there. But the same outlines more or less are found in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Or even better, you can make your own if you like from the reading materials. But in short, the main point here is so like when you're doing your meditations next week, you can take like this sort of way of looking at afflictive emotions and then use it to meditate. So it's important to incorporate it into your own experience, related to your own experience. So generally, well, one thing I wanted to mention, when we're meditating the afflictive emotions, it's good to start with identify which one is predominant in our life. That's the one we need to deal with first. It's like if you're going to weed a garden, look at, well, which weeds are the biggest and most harmful ones, and take them out first, right? And then work on the smaller ones, right? So in our own mind, we have to identify which afflictive emotions are the most problematic for me. Is it, anger or jealousy or low self-esteem or what? So identify which one's the most habitual, the most prominent, the most problematic for you, and then work on that one first. So go through this. Okay, and we'll look at this will become more clear as we look at anger, attachment, and then anger and ignorance. But first, we identify what is the entity of that afflictive emotion, and then what are the causes that give rise to it? What are the faults about it? What are the drawbacks about it? And then we'll look at antidotes, how to think in different ways so that it doesn't arise, or so that we can reduce it. But when you do that, be careful not to start with, especially like anger or attachment, be careful not to start with thinking about an instance that, so if you're looking at anger, when the anger was so strong that just when you think of that, it completely overwhelms your mind and there's no space to like meditate in a constructive way. So you don't want to, whenever we're meditating on an afflictive emotion, to try to understand how to reduce and eliminate it, we don't want to start with an experience or an emotion that's so powerful that just when we think of it, we're just reliving that whole disturbing emotion again. And there's no space in the mind for like thinking about it in a different way, right? For thinking about it rationally and constructively. So if that's an issue, then start with more of the kind of middling instance of, like anger, when we were kind of, mildly irritated. And then within that, try to understand how anger works. And then as we become more skillful at like dealing with it in a constructive way, then we can approach the more and more difficult instances of. It's the same with like trauma or being the victim of abuse or something. If you start with the one that's the most disturbing, it'll totally overwhelm, and there's no space to work with it in your mind. So you want to make sure, on the one hand, you have a sincere sense of how your own mind is disturbed by that afflictive emotion or how it arose. That has to be very vivid and real. But on the other, you also need to have some space to be able to think about it from different angles and apply these kind of reasonings from the Buddhist teachings to it. So I have to find that balance. Oh, yeah, okay. Let's put the outline in the chat box. Oh, Zella put, great. Was that from last week, that outline?
It's what's on the website right now.
Okay, yeah, good. Yeah, that's from last week, great. I was thinking maybe I can upload the outlines. Maybe at the end of the session, I'll try to upload to the chat box what I have. I don't know. I'll try right now while we're thinking of it. Let's try. Because I think I tried last time and I couldn't do.
You just have to drag and drop.
Oh, really?
Yes. So open the chat and then drag and drop.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes a few times, but.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. There's so many windows open on my computer. So. All right, here it is. But I drop it in the message box at the, oh, there it goes. Okay, I think I got it. I drop it in the message box at the bottom. And then send. It's going. Great. Okay, so it's there. All right. Then, if there's no more questions, then, well, I have to, then we'll look at the next thing, which is the wheel of life. So actually, we're going to look at more on attachment next, but for the rest of the course, we'll be using and referring to this image, the wheel of life. So this is an image actually commissioned by Shakyamuni Buddha. So the short story is during Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime, there was one king who was his student. I don't remember which king, but that king received a very immeasurably valuable gift from a neighboring king, leader of a neighboring kingdom. And then he wasn't sure what he could possibly give in return. So he went and asked the Buddha, and the Buddha said, bring a painter and I'll describe a painting to depict then, and I'll explain it to you, and then you send him this painting as a gift in return. So the king did that, and then sent this image, which is image of kind of basically about what is samsara and how are we bound in samsara and how can we be free from samsara. So he sent this this image, this painting, to the neighboring king with an explanation, and that king was very deeply moved and meditated on it, and by doing so achieved Nirvana, achieved freedom from samsara. So this will be, we'll use this, this image, be referring to it the rest of the course, or this module. So for now, for today, we'll zoom in on the middle part. You see, let's see, pointer happening here. Basically, there's how many rings? The center, and 1, 2, 3, 4 rings. So around the outside here is the 12 links of dependent arising. So that's one of the last things we'll go through. And then the next ring in, this has 5 sections. So this represents the 5 or the 6 realms of samsara, all the beings in samsara. And then the next one in represents, this has one black side and one white side. So the black side represents negative karma. And you see the beings here, they're going down from animal down to hungry, worse than animal as hungry ghost, worse than hungry ghost as a hell being. So it's through the force of non-virtuous karma, negative karma, taking lower and lower rebirth. And then the white side represents virtuous karma. So through the force of virtuous karma, one can take rebirth as a human, and then higher than that, a demigod, and higher than that, a deva or a god. So this represents how we take rebirth through higher or lower states through the force of non-virtuous or virtuous karma. And then the source of karma here is in the middle. There's these 3 animals in the middle. So here I'll zoom in. So you see there's these 3 animals in the middle. These represent the 3 root afflictions. Ignorance, that is the very root. And then, so here's a pig, represents, so the pig here represents ignorance. And then you see from the mouth of in the mouth of the pig is the tail of a snake, represents anger, and a pigeon represents attachment. So these are the 3 root afflictions, ignorance, anger, and attachment, represented as these 3 animals. So these are at the center of the whole thing, because these are, the root afflictions. These are what power causes us to create karma. That karma causes us to take rebirth in the different realms. And then the outside, the 12 links of dependent arising, is a more detailed description of how through the force of ignorance we create karma, and then how the karma is triggered and ripened at the time of death, throws us into a rebirth. And then in rebirths, how we develop a body, and this, especially the 6 sense faculties: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, body sense power. And then we come into contact with objects. By contacting objects, we see things, hear things, smell, taste things. And then by that contact, then we generate feelings of pleasure or pain or neutrality. And then in relation to those feelings, we generate an attachment or craving or aversion, ignorance. Attachment to pleasant feelings, aversion to unpleasant feelings. And then that triggers karma to ripen, and then throws us into rebirth again and again. So that's how this wheel of life, wheel of samsara works. But for now, for a concern, so we're going to look the rest of, we only have a few minutes left, but next session, especially at anger, attachment, and ignorance, these 3. Yeah. Oops. So yeah. So I'll just introduce you to what we're going to do next week, basically. So we'll look at more on attachment. So attachment, anger, and ignorance we'll each look at under 3 headings. First, the definition of each. And then the divisions. What are the different varieties, in this case of attachment? Then what are some of the additional causes, in addition to the general causes we looked at above, the 6 general types of causes? What are additional causes of attachment? And then the faults, and then antidotes. What are things we can do to try to reduce, eliminate attachment? Yeah. Just look, I don't want to just look at the basic, the fundamental definition of attachment here. So attachment is a mental factor, means, yeah, basically it's a sort of, not a, well, there's main minds and mental factors. So the main minds merely observe their object. And then the mental factors are like accompanying aspects of the mind that engage with the object in different ways, specific ways, and perform specific different functions with regard to whatever object we're observing. So attachment is a mental factor which observes, so it observes this object, a contaminated phenomena. So think of something you're attached to, like a person or status, reputation. So you observe that a phenomena, which itself is under the power of or produced by afflictive emotions and karma. And then the main thing is it exaggerates the object's attractiveness. So attachment exaggerates how attractive or how pleasing things are, and then desires to be in contact with that or enjoy it, and then clings to it. Right? Anyway, we'll discuss more next week about attachment in detail. Actually, yeah, I don't know. There's more to go over than I think we have time. So I'll probably have to, you'll see, I'll send out the outlines. You'll see if you look, there's a lot of outlines on attachment. I've made quite detailed. We probably won't have time to go through so much in detail, but I'll try to, because next session we'll need to go through at least attachment and anger both. Yeah. Anyway, any last questions? Otherwise, we'll dedicate. But yeah, again, so this week we've gone over just the afflictive emotions in general. They're being the causes of samsara. So some things you can reflect on during the week are, well, the main one is what is an afflictive emotion? How does it disturb the mind? And look at different instances of them, examples in your own experience. And then how do they function to how do they become habitual tendencies in the way we think and the way we act? And then how do they give rise to harmful actions which cause harm to ourselves or harm to others? And then how do they lead us thereby to create karma? And then how does that karma ripen? And especially think, what is the alternative? Sometimes when we're thinking about the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, we get too much caught up. I mean, I guess one difficulty in thinking about these is because this is like the world we've lived in, a world, from beginningless time, and then from the beginning of this life until now, we've primarily lived in a kind of a world that's so much pervaded by, so much colored by and influenced by and under the power of afflictive emotions and karma. It's hard to sort of imagine a different kind of world that's not shaped by that and by those. No. So that's one important thing to do, is try to imagine, well, what's the alternative? What would it be like to have an existence and an environment and friends and family associates that's completely shaped by wisdom and kindness and selflessness and humility and patience and compassion, that's just completely shaped by that, completely devoid of any afflictive emotions. Like, what would that be like, and is that possible or not? But yeah, so during the week, but reflect upon afflictive emotions and how they give rise to different kinds of suffering, and then if something else, an alternative, is possible. So let's dedicate now. We won't read the extensive dedication prayers here. Actually, I think we'll read the swift return prayer for Lam's Open. Let's do that instead. So I think I brought up here somewhere. Okay. Actually, I don't think it shows up on your screen when I share it and then alter the thing in the. Okay, I have to do it like this first. Into this one. All right, that'll work. So yeah, think of all the merit we've created. In this session, previous sessions, we rejoice. And then by the force of this merit, may ourselves and all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering. And may we have every form of well-being and happiness in the world. Especially may there be an end to hunger, thirst, famines, and war in the Ukraine, war in Sudan, other places in the world, end to sickness, disease, violence, and abuse. And then may all beings live in health, happiness, mutual loving, caring for one another and support. And may spiritual teachings, especially the Buddha Dharma, flourish. May all of our, His Holiness Dalai Lama, all of our teachers' lives be long and stable. And may we never be separated from them. And then especially may Khyentse Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who recently showed the aspect of passing away. May he quickly return in a form that's most beneficial to sentient beings and continue his work to benefit beings and benefit the Buddhist teachings into the future, even more effectively than before. So we can recite this prayer composed by His Holiness for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands. Please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And also may the Tupten Robuling and Santa Fe continue to flourish and have all the necessary conditions to continue providing programs like this and benefit to sentient beings. Okay, thank you all. See you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Venerable.